Greetings, brothers and sisters. Today we're going to get to the root of the name that was given to the Messiah and why this is important to know. We see today there is a whole lot of confusion and misrepresentation of his name, even pronunciation. In fact, many generations have now passed by since our Messiah walked upon the earth. We have seen the transliteration of his name from the original tongue, Hebrew, into Greek, Latin, and into modern-day English language. Now, this is not the same English our ancestors spoke. Even this has changed over time. But we see the real meaning of his name has been lost in translation. Let's consider today how many translations of the word we have and how many denominations. There's estimated to be around 45,000 denominations globally. No wonder there is so much confusion and division. Now this is exactly as foretold by those two legs of iron mixed with clay, meaning a divided kingdom on every matter. He gave us the parable of the good seed and the weeds. And what does this teach us and tell us? Well, consider what the weeds do to his garden, the world. Well, they dominate, they pollute, they corrupt, they defile, they choke, they damage the soil where the seed is planted, representing the mind. And of course, they prevent growth. Those weeds represent the minds of those who have been corrupted and defiled by the enemy through what he has sown within their minds. So with this in mind, we are going to get to the root of this and settle his true name by the power of his wisdom. Okay, like I said, why is this important to know his name? Well, we consider carefully what is spoken concerning the 144,000 who are sealed. Now, it speaks about this in Revelation 7, and it mentions there about the four angels who are told not to damage the land or the sea or the trees which represent the people until the seal have been put on the foreheads. And we see also our Messiah in Matthew 24. He states the following at the end. He will send his angels with a loud shofar call, and they will gather his elect. So we see the elect are gathered from the four winds of the earth by the four angels. And it is done when the seals are put up on their forehead. And also, what do we notice? Well, in Revelation 14, then I looked, and there before me was a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him the 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Well, what do we see? Well, they are the elect. They are sealed by the King. They know the name of the Lamb and the Father's name. And notice there are two names we need to know. Now, with that laid, we have set the foundations, and we will proceed further on this name. We will see that the name matters greatly to the Creator because he is about order, intent, and purpose. He is perfect in everything he does. He is consistent. And this is prophecy, meaning his word will come to pass just as he has declared by his prophets. And remember, he does not change his mind like mankind. Let's observe his pattern. We see that both the name of John the Baptist and the Messiah, both their names were given directly by the Creator to his Malach, the Hebrew for messenger or angel, one to announce the birth of John the Baptist and the name he was to be called. And notice that it's a Hebrew name, and the Hebrew name he was given is Yohanan. Now, we will discover that this name means Jehovah is gracious, and it comes from the name of the Creator. That's important to note. But this name has come down to us into the English, right, as John, but it was originally spoken in Hebrew. And two, to announce the birth of the Messiah and the name he was to be called. And you will discover that this was also a Hebrew name. Now, notice the two pattern again. we have John, who is preparing the way for the Messiah. And he has the name, the Father's name, in his name. And we'll notice that the Messiah will also come in the name of the Father. So both of them came from the Creator. Now also, we are told that both Yohanan and Messiah's mothers, Miriam and Elisheva, were related to one another. They were kinswomen, meaning Yohanan and Messiah were also related to some degree. We see that Yohanan's parents were of the tribe of Levi. They were Levites. This is the priestly division, meaning they studied the Torah, spoke Hebrew, and they were blameless, perfect before Yahweh, we are told. Likewise, Yeshua's mother and Joseph were of the tribe of Yehudah, the house of David. They also kept the Torah and the commandments, and also spoke Hebrew, meaning Yohanan and Yeshua spoke Hebrew. In fact, we're even told at the age of 12, Yeshua was advanced beyond the teachers of the Torah and his parents. Yeshua read Hebrew from the Isaiah scroll written in Hebrew. Now also, he stated, "Today this is fulfilled in your hearing," meaning prophecy. The people were amazed at his wisdom because he taught as one with knowledge and understanding, and he was getting his knowledge from his heavenly Father and Mother Wisdom. So with this in mind, we'll see the wisdom in his name in a bit. We will also see an original Hebrew scroll from the Vatican archives that show both the Father and the Son's name with the full vowels. Now, before we begin to get to this real name, we must go back to the original language, the Hebrew. What does wisdom teach us? Well, let us draw your attention to the book entitled The Prologue of the Wisdom of Yeshua ben Sirach. This book was written in Hebrew sometime between the years 200 to 175 BC, before the times of the Messiah. And it's called The Wisdom of Yeshua. And this book is full of great teaching for the wise. Now, we are told not to forget this one thing. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 6. All wisdom comes from Jehovah, and so do common sense and understanding. Now, this common sense and understanding is very important, because we have to have common sense and we have to have understanding. Now I want to read a little segment of the prologue, and I want to emphasize this one point. Wherefore, let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention. So we need to pay attention to these words, and to pardon us wherein we may seem to have come short of some words which we have labored to interpret. So there's effort and attention, but you see, we have come short of some words. Now we're told, for the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the Torah itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language. So you see, their own language, meaning the Hebrew, has a lot more force. It has a lot more power in it. And we're told that things uttered into other languages, meaning transliterated, do not have the same force or power in them. And we discussed this earlier, like from the Hebrew to the Greek or the Latin into modern day English. Wow, we can imagine how we are losing a lot of this in translation. So we want to get to the real force in the word, so we're going to go back to the original written language. So with this in mind, let's observe his wisdom. Now the Hebrew language is really quite deep language, and it is really three languages in one. It is a pictographic language conveying symbols as conveying deeper meaning, but also it is a number-based language, geometrical. So there's hidden codes there, but also is a phonetic language, and it's quite deep. Now what we're going to look at here is really something quite amazing. In Hebrew there's a thing called a Hebrew pun, which is the idea there's a wordplay in a sentence, and it's going to be really observed in Acts 4:12. We'll get into that in a moment, but before we do, I want you to point at something very, very amazing. There is what's known the Hebrew verbal root system, and it usually comprises of 3 consonants that make up this verbal root. And from that verbal root, we get many different meanings, many different words. And let's start. We'll start in Acts 4:12. Read this. Now, it says, "Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved." Now, in the English, we don't get to see the Hebrew pun here, but when you know some Hebrew, and I have to point out, I am really a baby when it comes to Hebrew. My understanding is very basic, but nevertheless, this is very obvious when you have understanding in Hebrew. And the idea here is it tells us that salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind. So there's a riddle here. It's saying that salvation is found in the name that has been given to man by which we must be saved. Now, what I mentioned there, this Hebrew root verb, and the one we're going to look at is comprising yod, shin, and ayin. So those 3 consonants there is the root, the verbal root for the word to do is save. And that's quite deep here, because we're going to see in a moment how deep the Hebrew language really is. Now, in this little table below here, what we're going to look at is something quite amazing. Now remember, we're talking about yod, shin, and ayin. And we're going to see that salvation is found in the Messiah's name. And this is deep, because what you'll see in a moment, and this Hebrew word here, pronounced Yeshua, right? Yeshua, right, is the name of our Messiah. And it says that salvation is found in this name. Well, the word for salvation in Hebrew is the word Yeshua. Yeshua. And what do we see here? Well, we see it is the exact same word. However, there's a hey added to the end and a slightly different pronunciation, but in the root word, which is where all of these words come from, this root word, which is yod, shin, ayin. We see that exactly as the word states, salvation is found in no other name, because we only find the word salvation in the name Yeshua. And that's deep. Think about that for a moment, right? You see, it's got yod, shin, vav, ayin. Yod, shin, vav, ayin. But the root there is yod, shin, and ayin. Now, also, the word to deliver in Hebrew is yasha. And we see that here. We got the same verbal root. We got the yod, the shin, and the ayin. Now also the word for deliverance, rescue, salvation, safety, and welfare is the word yesha. And what I really want to point here is that all of these meanings are conveyed through this root yod, shin, ayin. So when the Creator says you will call him Yeshua, for he will save his people from their sins, there was a reason the Creator chose that name. Because you see, it has to do with the root of his wisdom, because wisdom is far deeper. So, in summary, to save, the name Yeshua, we can see, as the word describes, salvation is found only in that name. And this is the only name that has been given to mankind by which we may be saved. Okay, let's observe. Let's observe more wisdom of the Most High. And we have 2 examples here. And we have the name Yahushua here. And this is comprised of the Creator's name and Shua, which is to do with salvation. And literally means Jehovah is salvation. And we see the English name for this is Joshua, but the Hebrew name is Yahushua. And we see that Joshua was one of the 12 spies who was sent into Canaan to spy out the land. And he also led the conquests against Canaan to claim back the land, the promised lands, to the Israelites. Now we know that Canaan is the descendant of Ham, the son of Noah. Okay, now also what do we notice? Joshua, and we have 12 spies. Well, we get the name Yeshua from this same root verbal word, consonants, which is Yod, Shin, and Ayin. Well, we see Yeshua and the 12 disciples, just like Joshua and the 12 spies. You see, there's hidden wisdom within this also. And we have the other example here, Joshua again, and this was the first high priest involved in the construction of the temple after the Babylonian captivity. Now we know that Yeshua, right, he said, if you destroy this temple, I'll raise in 3 days. So you see, the temple is really a spiritual building, and we see the Messiah is the one involved in the building of the temple, but it's the spiritual temple. And we see in like manner, we've been calling, as the Creator said in the book of Revelations, he's calling these people out of Babylon, you see, because Babylon is a mystery. And we see who the high priest that will be leading the people into the promised land. Well, it's going to be Yeshua. Wow, that's quite amazing. Now also Messiah said in John 5:43, he says, I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. But if someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. But you see, the name is very important because the Creator is consistent about the name, and we've just looked at some examples of that. Okay, what we are looking at here is a manuscript tucked away in the Vatican archives, a Hebrew manuscript, and we don't know how many there may be. We have been led to believe that the New Covenant manuscripts were written in Greek, yet no mention of any Hebrew manuscripts. But here we have one clearly visible and hidden, yet in the public if we know where to look. Now this reminds me of 2 Baruch chapter 39. It speaks about that fourth kingdom and the vision he was given. And it said that that kingdom would rule for many times on the plain, and the way of truth will hide itself in this. And we're told all who are polluted with unrighteousness will flee to it like evil beasts. Remember, they were called beast kingdoms. Well, that's pretty deep. Now, we know one thing, this could not have been transliterated from the Greek or the Latin, meaning that this scroll came from the original and has the full force of the Hebrew word, the language itself. But most importantly, in the scroll, we have the full vowel markers, which are the rules for how the words are pronounced. Now, firstly, let me assure you that I am basic at the Hebrew language. My level is beginner, but I do have knowledge with understanding. Now, let's observe the title of this manuscript. We see it states here, Yeshua HaMashiach Kepi Luca. So, we see that it says this is the Yeshua the Mashiach to Luca. All right? So this is Luca's account of Yeshua the Mashiach. And we see it's written in Hebrew and it has the vowel markers. Now, what it states a little bit further down about Zechariah and Elizabeth, John the Baptist's parents, well, this is talked about in Luke chapter 1:6. It says that they were both righteous, it says in the English, before Elohim. But we see in this scroll, we see down here, it says they were righteous, Zedekim Lifnei Yehovah. It says they were righteous before Yehovah. So we see in this document, we have both the son's name, Yeshua, but also we have the father's name, and it says Yehovah. Now, notice also there are no line numbers, etc., just the vowel markers, which shows how to pronounce the names. And in this Hebrew scroll, we can see that is the gospel according to Luca. and it has a Messiah's name. Now in a moment we're going to see the precise name where it talks about the name you are to call him, and we'll see the same name. Finally, we're going to look at the part of the document, the scroll, the Hebrew scroll, that speaks about Luke 131. Now we don't have the numbers here, but I'm going to point out the Hebrew where you can clearly see the name. And this is the name the angel, the Malach, said that you shall call him. And we see here it says the highlighted segment here in yellow, it says Vakarit Shemo, and call the name, Shemo name, Yeshua. And we have the full vowel markers here. We have the yod, the shin, the vav, and the ayin. There can be no mistake. This is the name. It says Yeshua. And finally, we'll finish up with Isaiah. In Hebrew is Yeshayahu. Even within this name, the prophet, we have the meaning. Yehovah is salvation. Now, we read these words in Isaiah 52:6. Therefore, my people will know my name. Therefore, in that day, they will know that it is I who foretold it. Behold, it is I. So, you see, we will know the name. And it states in that day. And remember, a day is like 1,000 years. It's referring to that seventh day, that appointed day, Sukkot. And we notice that between the end of the sixth seal and the beginning of the seventh seal, right, we see that the elect are sealed. And we also read, they will know the name of the Father, and they'll have the name written, the name of the Father and the Son. Now also in Proverbs chapter 30 verse 4, it states, who had ascended up into heaven, or descended, or who has gathered up the wind in its fist, who had bound the waters in a garment, who had established all the ends of the earth. What is his name, and what is his son's name, if thou canst tell? So you see, we were questioned here. We were asked the question, what is his name, and what is his son's name? Well, we are to know these. Of course, the name is Yehovah, the Father's name, and Yeshua. And Yahshua is the name where Yeshua comes from. It means Yehovah is salvation. And notice there are two names we are to know.